Hey there. I don't know if you've heard, but there's a great new radio show on Para X. 2 hosts, 1 hour, and too much fun. Stephanie and Heidi not only talk about the latest goings-on in the supernatural worlds, they live it. They want to hear from you. They want to help you understand and guide you. And they want you to tune in. So, grab a friend or come alone to gather around that metaphysical table with Heidi and Stephanie. If you're interested in the worlds of the unseen, tune in to the Gathering Radio Show, Tuesdays at 9 p.m. Eastern on Para X Radio.
Hi, this is Barry Fitzgerald, and I'll see you in the shadows.
Your source for everything paranormal. Para X. The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Para X, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
Welcome to another Monday night here on the Shadows Radio. As always, I am Rebecca, and tonight our Kara is
Cece.
Oh, I was going to say, did you hang up on me?
No.
Awkward pause. No, sorry.
No awkward pause.
Yes, Kara is still somewhere with the aliens. We don't know. I'm starting to send up smoke signals, so let me know if you see my smoke signals. Kind of waft them on, please. But in the meantime, we've been joined by the lovely and always talented and incredibly insightful Cece from the Para X chat room, who is going to share her insights with us tonight on a topic that she claims to know nothing about. Therefore, it'll be fun. I'm just kidding. But first, I want to talk about this mummy situation. Did you watch the mummy thing?
I did. Twice. I watched it live, and then I watched the replay right after.
Okay, so for people who are not quite familiar with what we're talking about, it was Expedition Unknown, which is Josh Gates' show on the Travel Channel, did a live 2-hour special out of Egypt with Dr. Zahi Hawass, and they uncovered a tomb of a high priest of the 5, and they, kind of went through the I'm going to call it a cemetery, but the area where all these tombs are buried. And at the very end, they actually uncovered this sarcophagus that hasn't been opened for 2,500 years. So,
yes.
I mean, it was a pretty dramatic thing. I mean, anytime they find a new sarcophagus, everyone gets super excited, especially if it's one that, like this one, appeared to be intact. Because many sarcophagus, if you've ever seen them, have kind of like a hole drilled into them. Either the top is broken, like somebody took a hammer to it, or there's like this weird kind of, it almost looks like a moth kind of nibbled at the side, but really it's where the grave robbers went in and pilfered all the stuff. So to find one that was not only that old, but also that intact is pretty impressive. So
really,
we got to watch 2 hours of them huffing and puffing around this dig site. And then the last 30 seconds were the actual tomb opening. But so let's kind of talk about like what they found, because I thought it was really cool. I have always been a huge Egyptologist-y nerd. I made that word up. But I've just been a fan of Egyptology just in general. I'd love to go to Egypt. That's on my bucket list for sure.
Yep, mine too.
And for a while in school, I actually thought I was going to be an Egyptologist until I realized how hot it is in Egypt. And then I was like, yeah, never mind. So back to air conditioning I went. But something like this for me, I love like all the documentaries about digging into tombs and all that kind of stuff. So this for me was like awesome.
Yes.
So they first started out with a family tomb that they went down into, and there was a father who had been broken into, and then a few of his.
First of all, the lady. When they opened
right.
up the one right in the beginning.
Yeah, but see, that seemed too staged to me. That one threw me off because, like, they were, you know, kind of doing their opening spiel. So for people who don't know, they were doing this little spiel, and all of a sudden these guys with these ropes kind of came in. They're like, and heave, and off the lid went, and it was just perfectly right there.
A little too much.
It seemed a little too staged. Like they had found her, said, "Ooh, she's perfect for the opening," and then they covered her back up. Like that's kind of the impression I got on that one. What do you think?
But I loved the ornate nature of the wrappings.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, she was covered in like a lapis bead kind of netting going on. I don't know if it was a dress or a wrapping, but it was really pretty. I mean, you could definitely see that whoever took the time to wrap this woman took the time, and they put some money into, you know, then they said she wasn't buried underground, so she didn't have a lot of money, because the richer you are, I guess the deeper into the ground you go.
Yeah.
But she did have, like I said, a very elaborate funerary garb on.
Yes.
So, I mean, and it was all fairly well, and like you could kind of see the pattern, and the beads were a gorgeous shade of blue.
And that they kept their colors so many years later.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah. So that, I mean,
that well preserved, but the desert will do that.
All right. So we all just need to be buried in the desert.
Yes.
Can we just set aside like a chunk of desert for everybody to be buried?
Sure.
Yeah.
I don't think I want to be a mummy.
You don't want to be a mummy? No. Okay.
I don't want to be a mummy.
All right. So after that, then they went down into the family tomb, which I thought was kind of cool. The one part that threw me off was like, here's the husband and what we think is his wife. I went over here are some skeletons of children. And then over here, I'm like, wait, what? Go back.
And over here is the family pet.
Oh, yeah, and then the dog skull. They're like, and the dog. Like, did they all, like, the husband died and everybody went together kind of thing? Or, like, how did this come about? Like, we need more information on that one.
It's hard. Yeah, and if they just haven't uncovered it that long ago, they may not know.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure there's still,
there's this stuff they have to understand there. But the canoptic charts, how beautiful those things were. It's just amazing.
Yeah,
just amazing.
And they found the statuary for the afterlife servants that I always pronounce incorrectly. But I love that at one point they were like, they picked them up, and Josh is sitting there going, "Oh, these are so amazing!" And all the guys who are digging going, "Yeah, there's like 7,000 more right there," pointing to this huge pile of them. Like, clearly not as rare as we thought.
Yeah,
but at the same time, pretty cool.
They are amazing little figurines with writing on them, which are your servants for the afterlife.
Yes, which like I said, I thought was very cool, and I just love kind of the casual, like, oh yeah, we found more canopic jars.
Yeah,
okay, thank you.
Tons of them.
Yeah, they just kind of tossed.
But the ones in the family tomb had amazing painting on them, which you don't normally see. We see the ones that are really rough clay jars, but not a lot with a lot of artwork on them.
Yeah, or like
and what I loved about that was the artwork that was really well preserved on the jars in the family tomb. It was incredible.
They also seemed a lot bigger than other ones that I've seen. I tend to, like, when I think of the ones that I've seen in, like, museums and things, I tend to think of them as, like, somewhere between, like, a 20-ounce bottle of soda and a 2-liter, like, somewhere in that size range. These ones seemed like they seem at least much wider, if not taller.
Right.
I kind of looked at them more as, like, maybe, like, a milk jug and a half kind of size. Like, they looked big. I mean, and it might have just been the perception from where I saw them. You know, I saw them on a TV screen in the middle of their natural surrounding versus sitting on a shelf in a museum. But I don't know. To me, they looked bigger. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I agree. And I think what he was saying was that it was a time period in which they were trying to almost go, what's the word, retro? Back to a time in Egypt where it was a full preservation of the body. So I think in the later years, they tried to get just a little bit more symbolic with, you know, they obviously didn't put all the intestines into the jar. So they had to limit it. So it was more of a sampling or just a representation. But this tomb seems to be a full-blown, real mummification process, at least for the parents.
Yeah, agreed. And like I said, they kind of just like glossed over the kids.
Yeah.
So I don't know how they ended up down there, or if it was like they went down to bury their parents and someone sealed them up. Like, wait, we're still here, which would be unfortunate, but like something in a Monty Python sketch.
Well, parents may have died without leaving the money, or the children died shortly thereafter.
Mm-hmm.
So the mummification process would never have been done.
Very true. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot that they can look into.
Yeah.
And we also don't even know if maybe they were buried in some form of container. It either disintegrated or it was smashed, because that tomb was raided. You could tell.
Yeah, it was.
So, I mean, we don't know. Like I said, they'll keep digging. Hopefully, they'll keep updating us. But I have to say, you and I were commenting on this back and forth last night. Is one of my things. We were watching the show, and I'm like, wait, who's the host of this show? Because this one's telling that one to be quiet, and this one's telling this one to go over here and wait a minute. And it was like they were dueling for the microphone. It was pretty funny.
They were. They were just trying to figure out who's going to out-talk the other person.
Yeah.
I agree that the real technical expertise is with Dr. Zahi.
Yes.
And Josh does have a degree in archaeology. I don't know what area it is in, however, but he knows his stuff.
He does, but I also feel like he's been out of practice because he's been doing this show. So yes, he's been digging things, and maybe he went. I'm not sure what school he actually went to. So he's got some background in it, but I don't know how in practice he is versus
Sure.
Obviously,
but then on the other hand,
that do it every day.
Yeah, he is the host of a show, and he's got to keep the dialogue going. But it was funny watching them go back and forth. Who are you talking to back there?
That was
mummies.
I think that was my favorite moment. Is he's talking to the camera. He being Josh was talking to the camera, and the people behind him. So for people who did not see the show. They're crawling through this very, very narrow tunnel that was giving me claustrophobic shivers, and I wasn't even there. It was maybe just enough for them to squeeze through by the skin of every body part they had, and they were dragging themselves because they couldn't even crawl because they couldn't stand up on their knees. So it was like a full-on army crawl through this, jagged, ragged, rocks and stuff. And at one point, the guy puts his hand down, and he goes, "Oh, there's another skull," and he just hands it back. Like, no big deal. Like, there you go. There's another skull. And it was just like, okay. And at some point, Josh starts talking to the camera, explaining something, and I forget exactly what he was explaining. But from the front, Dr. Huas, who was in the front and could obviously not turn around to see what Josh was talking about, goes, "Who are you talking to back there? Are you talking to the mummies? What are they saying?" And so, of course, it had to be the joke about how he was, chatting up the people that were still there.
People all over the world. Who are watching you.
It was like I said, it was
awesome.
amusing. Yeah. And I mean, if you've ever seen a documentary with Dr. Zahi Hawass in it, that is his style. He just talks and talks and talks and talks and talks
constantly.
And anybody who's next to him just kind of stands there and nods.
Yes.
But it was interesting though that we got to see him work, which is not something you normally get to see because most of his documentaries are kind of staged and planned. And we found this thing. Let me show you this thing. This is what this thing means. And it's all kind of talking head kind of stuff. This time you actually got to see him. I don't know if you're kind of watching him direct the crew as to how to lift certain things and like, oh, don't touch that because that's, something we need to document first and make sure we're taking a picture. I thought that was like a really interesting look into kind of what those guys do literally every day.
Right. And let's face it, most archaeologists are crawling on their hands and knees through tunnels to get places like that.
All I do like it was like one of my friends actually commented, and we are going. And it was a good 5 minutes of weird grunting noises for sure.
Yeah.
But
they also has to be said that's Egypt.
Yeah.
Even at night, it's sweltering hot. Even underground, it is sweltering hot.
I looked it up, and according to the weather, it was only 68 degrees at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Oh my God! At 2 o'clock in the morning,
they were sweating like
They were sweating bullets.
Yeah, so I don't know if it was just maybe because, and we were saying like they were in a very small space with camera lights and work lights, which are obviously not insulated very well. So that probably added to it. But technically, it was only 68 degrees there, according to the internet weather service. That
I don't know how long it takes to cool down, though.
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, I was just curious because I saw them sweating too, and I was like, wow, that's got to be dying. Like, how hot is it there? And I looked it up, and I was like, oh, I don't know.
But the tomb was incredible.
The actual tomb itself, to be honest with you, kind of threw me off. I was expecting more along the lines of like King Tut's tomb or something from the Valley of the Kings, where there's a lot of painted work and a lot of piles of stuff. And I don't know if I just missed it, or they shot past it, or they just haven't uncovered it. So
I don't think they've uncovered it yet. That's
what I'm wondering. Is maybe they just, like I said, they were just in it to bust open the sarcophagus on TV, and the rest of it is going to come later.
Well, remember, there's a shaft going down further that he pointed to, saying, more down there.
Yeah, but
Makes me wonder where the actual entrance is, because I don't think they hit the entrance.
Yeah, I don't think they did either. They definitely came in from a side door.
Or just dug their way through
or
whatever.
They just busted through the wall, for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's talk about that mummy, because that was amazing. It was perfectly preserved, perfectly wrapped, with the original, like, ornamentation and banding still in place, which
you never see that.
No,
ever. And you could actually make out the symbol for Isis on the chest. It was beautiful, just beautifully done. The wrappings were still intact and really tightly woven. It's just amazing how good a shape that thing was in. The only thing I had issues with, Josh, when he went to the embalming jar.
Stuck his hand in there?
And then if you look right afterwards, he's rubbing his beard and his head. And I think it might have been the same hand that he reached in there with. And I'm going, dude.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Yeah. It was, for sure. Like you said, you can definitely tell who the TV host was and who the professionals were. Not to say anything against Josh Gates. He's, he's awesome. He's a nice guy. I've met him. He's, he knows his stuff. I'm not saying that. It's just, there were some moments where you're like, but you could also tell who never did TV before, because there was a couple of times where like the camera guy was there and then somebody would go stick his butt in the way and you're like, that's a great shot. Thank you.
I saw that. Yeah. Great butt shot.
Yeah. But it was just, I don't know. We were actually talking about it here at the house the other day, yesterday actually, and we were saying, like, do you think they knew how preserved the mummy was when they started cracking into this thing? Because I feel like it was like a perfectly staged television moment.
Oh, I don't think they did.
Because we were joking about it being like a full-on Al Capone's vault situation where they're going to bust it open and nobody be in there.
Nobody be there. Yeah. I don't think they did. I really don't think they did.
Well, that was going to be my question.
Just a look on his face when the tomb, when they opened it up.
Yeah.
He was genuinely surprised. I'm talking about
Dr.
Hawass.
Yeah. Well, is there any like scanning or anything that they do with something like that? I don't know. I'm asking for real. Like, do you know, like,
how could you get scanning equipment in there?
I don't know. That's what I'm asking. If there's, I don't know if there's.
I don't think there's anything even small enough that they could put in there to see what's inside of the sarcophagus, because that's about what, 4 inches of stone, marble.
Yeah, I mean they're pretty. For sure, they're very thick. I don't know. There's a lot that just seemed like a perfect TV moment where it's like, hey, we're gonna hype this thing up, and then holy crap, like we actually did something good. Not that they're not doing other things good, but it was just like it was like a perfect moment where you could see, like, even on all their faces.
Yeah. And the interesting part about what they said was it looked like he was embalmed there as well.
Well, they said he was rich enough to have his own workshop in the actual tomb.
True.
Which is incredible. Which is what Josh Gates stuck his hand in and then rubbed on his head. I just hope it wasn't, something.
Which means somebody took the time, and then he was immediately sealed up. So,
which probably
I guess that helped
preservation for sure. Yeah, he wasn't carried through anything. He wasn't laid to rest for. I mean, he wasn't set out for viewing or something like that, or they had to wait till the family raised enough money. There was one that I remember reading about when I was little where the family had raised enough money to do the mummification process, but hadn't raised enough money to bury the body.
Oh, wow.
So they actually put it in a wood box, and on the top of it, they carved and said, sorry, we didn't like that. And they basically wrote that story. They said, we had to do this in chunks, basically.
Oh, my.
We had enough money to mummify, and then they put like a date, and then they said, here lies the preserved body of person. I forget the name. And then at the bottom, it was like, raised enough money or collected enough money to finally bury on, and then there was a date there, too. And it was like,
wow.
People complain about money problems today. But I'm thinking when you're like a little sheep herder on the side of the banks of the Nile 2,500 years ago, you probably aren't making a lot of money. And I don't know how much the mummification process cost, but in that case, it was a very interesting representation of like, okay, so if you're not a rich guy, how do you do it?
Bad. Amazing. And the interesting part of it, too, is the wax skull.
Oh, that was first when they stuck the camera in there. For a second, I was like, "That's a doll. That's creepy."
Right.
And then they pulled it out. I'm like, well, now you know what that guy's face looked like.
Looks like.
So when they do the scans of the mummy, even if it's obviously just skull left, they can do a 3D interpretation of what that guy looked like. That specific person. They don't have to do like a composite of all the characteristics we know about this time period. No, they can actually do. This is what this guy looked like. Here you go.
Right.
Because they have that. And the fact that they said that this is like the only place they found a wax skull like that is amazing.
Oh, totally. And we don't know what else is behind there, too, because it looked like it was halfway sort of buried in sand. But why was it walled up like that? So I'm wondering what else is back there. We could very much have a King Tut's tomb, although at a lower scale. At that point in time, the priests were extremely powerful.
Yes.
So, who knows what is buried back there with them. It's going to be really interesting to see what else comes out of that dig. I was excited.
Yeah, no, it was really cool. And like I said, it was one of those things where like I honestly didn't even know about it until after I looked at my DVR for the day and I was like, oh wait, they're doing this thing. That's really cool. And I'm glad I caught it, and I'm glad I was able to tune in because it was fascinating.
Yeah, I was kind of glad that I got to see it live.
Yes.
I think that it's one thing to watch the replays, but in order to sit there and go through the whole experience of them opening up that sarcophagus was just amazing, and how perfectly preserved that thing is. I don't know how they're going to get it out of the tomb, because of course once it's exposed to oxygen, it's going to start to disintegrate, so they got to get it out of there. But I don't know how they're going to do it through that small container.
Well, I feel like they've done this a lot.
Yeah, I know.
So they've probably got something like some.
I'm sure they have a capsule of some sort that they're going to put the.
Yeah, they have to know somehow like how to do this because I mean there are mummies all over the world that are not disintegrating and they're sitting out in the open. So they have to know somehow.
Yeah. Well, it's not the mummies themselves, but it's the wrappings.
Oh, yeah,
and I really hope they keep that thing intact. I hope they don't cut it open.
I'm
really
sure now with the technology and the scanning that we have, they're going to scan it for sure. But I don't think they're going to. I doubt they'll cut into it.
I really hope not, because it is just so perfect.
Mm-hmm.
As if it had been done, not that long ago.
Yeah.
This is like 2,500 years ago. It looked like it had been in the ground 100 years.
And
it did
wickedly
not
symmetrical too. That was the other thing where it was like perfectly like if you bought a mummy in a gift shop, like a little mummy statue, and they show you they're perfectly V'd like this. That's the first one I've ever seen that actually looked like that. Usually they're kind of haphazardly skewed, and and yes, I understand that they've been in the ground for a very long time, but I mean.
And usually pilfered for all the amulets and what have you, any sort of gold on them. So they've already been pilfered a lot. In this case, nothing.
Yeah, and this one was perfect.
Totally amazing. I loved it.
It was fantastic, I think.
It was worth it for something else to say, Josh, quiet.
I want you to appreciate this. Shush!
Look at it, but in silence.
But I do love, my favorite still was are you talking to the mummies back there? And then I don't know. I was amused, and I was amused by the fact that he put his hand down. He goes, "Oh," and I found a skull, and he just kind of handed it off. Like, yep. Like for me, other people would pick up a skull and be like, "Ah, oh my god!" And he was like, "Meh."
Well, here's the thing, though, and that goes back to where's the entrance, because they obviously had to dig that tunnel. So where are they finding these skulls, and what were those skulls there for? And what were they trotting on?
So something that I read previously said, and I don't know if this applies to this one too, but a lot of the tunnels that they find, because they're so poorly hidden, they're actually like those are the tunnels that the grave robbers used. So the grave robbers would kind of dig their own tunnels, get in, and then you realize that, they busted through a wall rather than going through the front door or the entrance of whatever space they're supposed to be going into. That's why they're in these like very narrow, rough-hewn tunnels.
Okay, so that they just sort of came in, trashed the place, but didn't go far enough.
Yeah, and they did, and so they kind of left like these shafts all over. Like, so what they would do is they would dig like these little 6-foot shafts or so to test and see if there's anything beyond. So like, say you're in the first room, so all right, I'm just gonna dig a 6-foot shaft here and here and here and see, up, down, left, right, and then say, okay, anything in either of those directions? No? All right, let's move to the next room. Versus, oh, look, this shaft actually we busted out into something else. Let's keep digging this one. And that's why they were, and again, I read that in a book. Actually, I think it was written by Dr. Zahi Hawass years ago, where they said that's what they mostly find the robbers' tunnels, which then lead them to the actual entrances where they can dig out and, go in the actual door.
A question in the chat room was, don't they basically bury everyone associated with the elite? To a certain degree, they did that. And in some cases, they buried the servants, they buried offerings, they buried a lot of people with them, sometimes alive. But that hadn't been done for centuries prior to that. And in this case, it was a high priest. So he probably did not get buried with that many or a family. I'm not sure whether the priests were allowed to marry or not. I cannot remember. But he would have been buried probably, if they dig back further, there may be family members or other priests associated with the Temple of Thoth.
Yeah, that's the big thing, is that they were in like an offshoot chamber where, for example, King Tut, I believe it was, or maybe it was Ramses II. One of those guys, they were in the main chamber, they all by themselves, like dead center with all this stuff surrounding them. And then off to the side, there was a door, and you open the door, and there were 6 mummies stacked like a, like a Domino's, pizza boxes stacked up on the side. And it was like, oh, okay. And it was like, oh, that's his mother and his sister and his wife. Like, oh, that's nice. They didn't get no boxes? Okay.
No, they don't get boxes.
Yeah. And that's kind of what happened for a lot of these guys. It's like, oh, no, that's their servants. Now, you said something about them being buried alive. And I actually read recently something where they said that was not necessarily true. There were some servants who would actually sacrifice themselves.
But they would drink poison, maybe. But I don't know.
Or they would drink poison for their masters or something like that, where they were in service to somebody for so long that they felt like they owed them, or if they had a life debt or something like that. But they said that they believe, and again, this is one specific Journal of Archaeology article opinion, but they said, that they didn't believe necessarily that people were like thrown in the pit, kind of like you see in movies where it's like
Indiana Jones.
That guy's dead, you go. Keep him company. I was like, no, it was more like people like, if they were in service for years and years and years, then they would drink poisons, or wives who were so, distraught by the death of their husband, or they realized that, oh, my husband's dead, I now have no way to support myself, would often do, kind of end themselves to be buried together.
And again, in the chat room brought up a great point. If it's the grade of 5, the first of 5, than where the other 4. And of course, as you die, they're replaced with the next person. So how many are buried there? And is this the priest's necropolis?
That was one of the things that I wish they had gone into a little bit more, was possibly, what is actually the 5? Like, they kept saying that, like, I was supposed to know what that meant. And I mean, I'm sure I could have Googled it while I was watching, but it was the same time I was like, I want you to tell me what that means, like, why am I supposed to be impressed by this? And, who are these people supposed to be? And so,
right.
So they found a couple. They found a bunch of what they said. The woman was a singer. The one man was a singer.
The chanter. Yeah.
They called him a singer too, but
singer. Yeah, they called him a singer.
So, I mean, I feel like you're on the right track where this is probably basically the church cemetery.
Yeah.
And they're finding all these people. So the very next thing they're going to start to find is all the other high priests. They have to be there somewhere.
Yeah, I want to go down that. Every time he pointed at that hole in the ground right at the end, and I'm going, why did you stop?
Because the next show is coming on. They were already 15 minutes over.
I know, but geez.
Oh, I know. I agree.
Live television should be allowed to go over one. Yeah.
But we had a nice 5-minute shot of a camel. Like, that was good.
That was a really nice shot, though. If you looked at it,
it was
brilliantly set up, brilliantly framed.
It was just an awkward, like, that guy was talking, and all of a sudden there was a camel. It was just random.
Well, the camel kind of stole the show for a while.
He did. He was impressive.
He was.
Yeah. I don't know. The whole thing was really cool to see. I think it gave us a very interesting and unique look on some of the stuff. I feel like they're going to release it as like a bonus episode kind of thing, which they need to do with some more information about not necessarily stuff that they find upcoming, but the stuff that you already found. Give me some more info about the stuff that you already found, because that's what I want to know.
Yeah, I mean, outside when they were talking, he had this whole table set up with different relics. The eyes made out of ivory.
That was cool.
It was really interesting. The amount of stuff that they found on this archaeological dig was incredible. I mean, there was just tables and tables and tables of stuff. They should have just panned the camera just a little bit closer and a lot longer, so that we could have taken a look at it.
Yeah, I feel like that guy, the new Dr. Hawass, because he took over for the ministry job that he used to have. I feel like he got a little shortchanged because they kept cutting him off and was like, just let him talk.
He had a lot of good knowledge there.
Yeah, just let him talk about the things, and he's got all this stuff. And he was the one with like the stacks of funerary statuary. He's like, look at all my statues. Like, you have
look at all of them.
Can I have just that one? Like, can I just?
And the masks.
Yes, the masks were cool. And I felt like they didn't even talk about he picked up the one, he was like, this is so well preserved. I'm like, but the one next to it, I can still see features from way over here. So that had to be cool too.
I mean, the sheer craftsmanship of this stuff to last that long. Amazing. I know, like I said, the desert does help preserve things, but it was amazing how good, intact all of these objects are. Mm-hmm. Which means, number one, they were hidden well enough to keep them away from the grave robbers. And the bodies were preserved and embalmed well enough that they lasted this long. In most cases.
It was pretty awesome.
Wow.
Somebody on our Facebook page asked, and they said, does this mean there was a ghost in the tomb if you're talking about it on Paranormal Radio? And I was like, yes, there was.
Yes.
Let's just go with that. Ghost.
And for people to know why you have to put a mask on when you open up those things.
Because curses.
Well, not just curses, but dear God, you have no idea what fungus, what bacteria, what's been in those things. You can put a mask on.
That was one of the Twitter questions. I don't know if you caught that part at the end, or somebody asked, and there was kind of a weird cut on the camera, so I don't know if they actually. But one of the Twitter questions was, what did it smell like when they opened up the sarcophagus.
Yeah.
And Josh actually said the one in the family tomb smelled worse than the preserved one. And I wonder it's because it is so well preserved that, it's not really decayed to the level of the father in the family tomb.
Yeah.
Who looked like he'd seen something scary because his jaw was wide open.
Yeah, really. No, that was really badly embalmed. But back to the person who wanted to know if there was a ghost in there. Probably not, but understand this was the temple of Thoth. This was no little sect or a cult. This was a major deity, and a lot of Egyptian ritual and Egyptian magic occurred within the Temple of Thoth.
Mm-hmm.
That's why Crowley used Thoth as one of his main deities. So, there you go.
Is there actually any temple left, or is it just
ruins?
Just ruins, yeah. Okay. I was just trying to see real quick. I mean, I know that they showed some ruins at some point during the show, but I thought that was just the city. I didn't think that was the actual temple.
I think that was the city that they were in.
Yeah, so the temple's actually gone, as far as I know.
Pretty much. Pretty much most of them are.
Not Assassin's Creed. Sorry, I was just Googling real quick to see if I could find a picture of a temple, and the first thing that comes up is Assassin's Creed. Apparently, there's a character named Thoth in Assassin's Creed.
Oh,
yeah, so Thoth, and are we pronouncing that? It's Thoth, right?
Thoth.
Yeah. He is the ibis-headed man. If you've seen the one with the guy that has the long, pointy bird nose, that's who we're talking about. He also sometimes is shown as a baboon.
Mm-hmm.
And then he was the husband of Ma'at.
Ma'at,
yeah. There's an apostrophe. Sometimes it's Ma'at, depending on who you're talking to.
Yeah, that's true. Ma'at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he has a feminine version called Seshat, which, again, I probably just butchered.
Sheshet.
That's what I said. Something like that. I don't know. But he led the pantheon of the principal deities. So, I mean, he's got a lot of things going on here.
Yeah. This, like I said, and the priests were not your average Joe. These were very powerful men, especially at that time. Major, magicians and revered.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
You know what I'm waiting for? So, Thoth, one of the big things that he's known for is he's called the scribe of the gods, right?
Yes.
So they said this on the show that he's known for supposedly creating writing and hieroglyphics and everything. So I'm waiting for them to find a library or something like that used to be a library, because I feel like if they're going to find anything anywhere, this is where it's going to be.
Sure.
Because I mean, that's where I would put a library. Right at the temple of the god of writing, like
if nothing else, if this priest had his own writings or his own journals or whatever, more than likely they would be buried with him. So it's possible that as they start digging back in those chambers, they're going to find a lot more information.
Well, I'm just thinking like at the temple in general, like in that temple space where they're digging up all these people associated with this temple.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're going to find.
Very likely, yeah.
At least I hope they're going to find. That's my hope, is that they're going to poke.
Well, we lost the entire Library of Alexandria, yes.
I didn't lose it. It's over there. It's just on fire. Sorry. Too soon?
No, too soon.
Sorry. All right. Well, the whole thing was cool. It was a surprise. It was a cool surprise to see for me anyway, because I didn't know what was happening.
I was very happy.
It was mummies, and it was exciting.
I loved it.
So one of the things that I actually associated kind of with this, and I know we were going to talk about something totally different, and I decided to say screw that, and I closed the window, so we're not going to talk about that anymore. Now we're going to talk about this for the last 10 minutes of the show. One of the things that I had a guest on years ago who was talking about doing a paranormal investigation at the Valley of the Kings. And he said that, he was sanctioned to do it. They were allowed to do it. They were doing it for like a documentary or something. And he said, I expected all kinds of stuff. He goes, I expected with all these bodies around and all these people in this sacred place of worship, and there were sacrifices of varying kinds. And he said we found literally nothing. He goes, it was the most boring time that I spent in that space. He goes, I spent a lot of time in the Valley of the Kings, seeing the tombs and learning about the history part of it and doing all that. He goes, the actual investigation part was boring. Mm-hmm. And I'm trying to think, I know that the Egyptian concept of the afterlife is very elaborate.
Extremely.
Yeah, they have a lot of levels. They have, you have to win the board game to move on to paradise. You have to be weighed and measured.
Your heart has to be measured against a feather.
Yeah. There's a lot of steps. You're not just rolling in going, hey, I died. Like that. That's not how it works. So, you would have to think with all those steps, somebody had to fail somewhere along the line and get left behind, right?
One would think.
At least in my head, that's what I would think. Somebody got left behind. So why wouldn't there be somebody hanging out there? Or do you think the people that got left behind are in the cities or something? Like they weren't the rich people in the valleys?
Well, the valleys were, it's like us going to graveyards and expecting them to be haunted. And some may be, but a lot of them aren't. Mm-hmm. And remember, the ones that are haunted here, it's because people keep returning to them and bringing up memories. And so maybe some spirits, recent ones, may be attracted to them. But if you go back that far, nobody's, visiting the tombs because nobody knows where they are. But, what's the point of a soul sticking around if there's nobody there to visit with?
Very true. But I feel like a lot of these these people were buried in the center of everything. The pyramids at the time were in the middle of a town. They weren't on the edge of Cairo. They were in the middle of the village. Well, maybe on the edge of the village, but they were on
the edge. Yeah.
The burial sites were the center of many, many things. They were the temples. They were the marketplaces. They were all these things. These people were not getting buried off, in some cemetery on some back dark road in the middle of the country, like we do now. No, they were in the middle of everything. So I would think, even if they hung around the activity of life, they still would be somewhere near where their body was.
One would think.
Again, we're also 2,500 years later, so.
Yeah. That's a lot of time to be waiting around for people.
Maybe they wanted to be tour guides.
Yeah.
That would be awesome. Could you imagine doing a tour of let's go to the Great Pyramid at Giza, and we're following the tour guide, and he's babbling along, and behind him you just see this guy in a, dressed like an ancient Egyptian, walking behind him going, nope.
Not how it done.
Nope. You guys are dumb. That's not how it worked. We built this as a casino. What are you thinking? There was never any curse. Yeah. That would be me. That was, now I got that image in my head, and now that's what I want it to be.
That's not good. Yeah.
I want that to be the next paranormal show.
Yeah, and it's a very good point. Does your religion affect your ability to stick around after the afterlife, or does your consciousness automatically go to whatever afterlife you think you're going to have?
That's an interesting thought, and it's actually something that I've thought of before, that I've kind of batted around, because my big thing is when we do things like house clearings, everyone always goes to sage, and they always go to kind of the pagan custom of saging a house and saying a specific incantation. Let me not say everyone. Most people do that. But you've also got a Christian version of that with holy water and, prayers. You've got Native American ways of doing it with sand and dirt. There are all different ways of doing it. So do you do it based on the belief of the living, or do you do it based on the belief of the dead? That was kind of my question back and forth, and it kind of goes the same thing with what you're saying. Does your religion impact the actual outcome of something that you believe? So, if I believe something strong enough, is that going to make it true? So if I'm Christian and I go to the end and I believe that I'm going to go to the pearly gates or hell, whichever kind of person I believe I am, is that the way it's going to happen, or is it just going to happen the way it happens, and later I'm going to find out that either I was really right or really wrong?
Yeah. Or does the person who's doing this aging, cleansing, whatever, is the act itself closing off the haunting to the perception of the person doing it?
Yeah.
As well.
Well, that's the other thing. I've always done this thing where I've always started with, I'm going to do it the way that you as the homeowner believe is going to work, because then you believe it's going to work and I feel better. Yeah. And then if that doesn't work, then we'll try other ways, because maybe, but I always have this image in my head. And again, I always like to imagine the ghosts as like smart asses standing behind you. But like, while you're sitting there going, the power of Christ compels you. And they're sitting there going, who? Yeah. Who's that? Like, I'm supposed to know who that is? Yes. So, yeah. That's always kind of been my way of explaining that to people. But again, you're right. When you talk about the afterlife and you talk about like, okay, well, I believe that I'm going to go and my heart's going to be weighed and measured, and I'm going to then, I'm going to mash up cultures here. I'm going to pretend that I'm going to ride the river Styx to the way station. My heart's going to be weighed against a feather. I'm going to get through. I'm going to walk through the fields of Elysium. I'm going to get to Valhalla, which is behind the pearly gates. That's what I believe. I think that's going to happen just because I believe it.
Well, I mean, look at it this way. If you believe that your current life is really happy and you're content with it, it will be.
Oh, then I'm doomed.
Yeah, me too.
Doomed.
But, is heaven and hell what we make it now? Is life what we make it now? Through our own perceptions? And then maybe the afterlife is too.
Yeah, I guess.
If you live your life according to the way that the pharaohs and the Egyptian gods wanted you to, and that's your belief system, that the death situation would be exactly the same. I believe my life is pure when I was alive. I will be here when I'm dead. And even if you're not there, maybe the perception is that you're there. I mean, how many do you really believe that ghosts walk through walls thinking that, I don't know where I am. They know where they are. And who knows if they believe that they're in the time period in which they were alive? Do they know that the time period has changed? Or they're just going about their day-to-day events because they think that they're still alive and in the time period in which they were. See what I'm saying? It's perception.
Yeah, I know. I'm thinking of it more philosophically. Like, we know you're going to die. At some point everybody's going to die. Sorry. I know you want to live forever. It ain't going to happen. I would love to live forever. Well, no, maybe not forever.
I will be as a robot.
I would love to live forever if I could stay 35. Yeah. I haven't been 35 yet, but I'm assuming it's going to be a good year.
I'm waiting to get there, but you know.
So I'm going to go with 35 because it's nice even. I'm making enough money to live comfortably, but I'm not old and like falling apart yet where all the aches and pains start to set in. So I'm going to go with that one. But okay, that was a joke. I'm sorry. I'm not implying that anybody over the age of 35 has aches and pains and is old. So let's just go with, if I could live forever at 35, I would live forever. I would probably live a couple hundred years. Then I would get annoyed. But at the same time, I also don't know if I want to live long enough to watch all the people that I love die. But there was a point.
You'd make a lousy vampire.
I would make I was going to say a bad word. Make a terrible vampire because the sight of blood makes me puke. But unrelated. Where was I going with that statement?
I don't know. You were talking about living forever.
Right, but why was I talking about living forever?
Something about, ghosts, if they believe that they're living.
Oh, right. Okay. So if I was not a human forever, if I had to then live my forever life as a ghost, forever life, I was like that one. I don't know. Would I know where I was? Yeah, I would know where I was for sure. But at the same time, I turn around and go, the way things change, I'm alive, and sometimes I don't know where I am. Like, I went back to where I lived. I lived on a street in Pittsburgh for 12 months. I lived on that street, and it was only a year. Okay, fine. But I drove past it the other day, and I completely blew right past the building that I lived in. I completely blew straight past it because they changed the front of it, and I was like, "What the? It's only been 2 years. Like I've been there recently." And it was like, "All right, that awkward." I meant to go there, but I don't know. I feel like. But
then you have
the way things
you
are
haven't
changing.
seen the place for a while.
Yeah, but
now think of people changing around that you see every day. If you see them every day and they change little by little by little by little, it doesn't become that noticeable, right?
No, I disagree. I mean, I do feel like there are some things that change, and I've watched buildings go up in places. And, like, I drive by that spot every day. I watched you put the frame up. I watched you put the outside up. I watched you put the inside up. I watched you put the sign up. You know, I was there for your grand opening party. And I still drive by and go, hey, when did that open? You know, like, I still catch myself going, like, wait, that was the old, you know, grocery store. Now it's a strip mall, whatever. You know what I mean? Like, I still catch myself doing that because you tend to lock in a nostalgia period. And it's generally the first time you experience a space. So, like, I walk into a room, and if the walls are blue, I'm generally going to remember the walls being blue for as long as I remember that room. And I feel like, for me anyway, that's what I tend to do. I tend to lock in the image of the first time I saw a space.
Okay.
I know I'm okay. I'm fine.
No. You're going to make a lousy ghost.
I'm going to make a terrible ghost. Just like I'm going to make a terrible vampire. No, I'm not. I'm going to make an awesome ghost because I'm going to be that one walking behind the tour guide going, nope, that's not how it happened. This guy's dumb. Don't tip him. That's going to be me. I'll be an awesome ghost.
Nothing ever happens in this room. Oh, really? Crash. Yeah.
Haunted by the ghost of nope. Wonk. Yeah.
Ghost with attitudes.
I could do that. That would make an awesome TV show. I want to make that a sitcom now.
Ghost with attitudes?
No, just annoying ghosts that like are haunting a location that's supposedly haunted and just annoying the tourists. That would be an awesome sitcom.
Annoying ghosts.
What are you doing? Tormenting tourists. All right, well, we are out of time, madam. Thank you so much for your insights and all of our conversations about the digging of dead people.
Yeah. Next week, ghosts at short sheet hotel rooms.
Or put the saran wrap on the toilet paper.
Yeah.
I like that one. That's a good plan. Let's do that.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, everybody. As always, I'm Rebecca.
I'm Cece.
And we will see you in the shadows.
Paramount. The worms crawl in, the worms crawl out. They crawl all over your dirty snout, your chest. My name is David Walton. I am a vocal performer for What Are You Afraid Of? Horror and Paranormal show. And I have carried the burden of a terrible secret. I am actually what is offensively called a ghost. For years now I have concealed my ectoplasmic existence from my friends and family in fear of a common prejudice against ghosts, or what we like to call the disembodied. I have existed frightened of being discovered, unable to do physical acts that the embodied take for granted, such as walking a squirrel, or drinking a glass of vitamin E milk fresh squeezed from a whale.